It is May 7th, 2024. This is our Board of Education meeting at 5:01 p.m. We're going to start by indicating who's here. Apparently not with Clark. Julie.
Julie Jackson.
Kim Chandler.
Connie Burgess.
Chris Wynn.
Karen Winder.
Clark Nelson.
Todd Hauber.
Rich Nye.
And Nicole McDermott. All right, we're going to start off by having a presentation. Sherry Sorensen is here and Rick is here to answer some questions and go over some data from our DLI, especially pertaining to our secondary schools. So go ahead and take it away.
Board President, Board Superintendent, Superintendency, thank you. I feel like I'm a student giving a presentation and Sherry's my teacher, just who can whisper and help in my ear. So I'll go through the slides here and we'll see how much she has to help me out. She did all the heavy lifting on this, by the way. I just get the privilege of presenting. First few slides that I have for you are just reminders, reminder type slides, just sticking with our same format or same template. Graduate of Granite, our priority in our strategic plan is an academic priority. We have an objective within that priority of personalized competency-based learning and an action within that objective of offering specialized courses. And DLI would fit under that action. Just as a reminder too, org chart wise, where DLI falls, Sherry falls is under our curriculum and instruction department. And I've just highlighted there in that visual. Objectives for tonight is to provide a summary of dual language immersion program at the secondary school level. We've done elementary school levels and specifically talked about challenges around one traditional class and what that means as we get smaller schools. Tonight's is just some secondary information, what that looks like in secondary, with benefits and challenges highlighted as well. As a reminder, our junior high schools that have secondary DLI, we have 8 of those. Chinese, we have Benning and Bonneville. French, Churchill and Jefferson. And Spanish, we have those 4 junior high schools. In our high schools, we have 8 as well, Chinese being Cottonwood, Taylorsville, French, Skyline, Kearns, and Spanish, Olympus, Taylorsville, Granger, and Kearns. So we have, the most DLI we have is Spanish, and therefore you see that larger in the secondary feeders. Wanted to highlight best practices for secondary instruction. Once again, instruction in the target language 100% of the time while you're in that class. So in my mind, I just want to differentiate in elementary, it's 50% of the time in that language, 50% out. In secondary, it's 100% while you're in that DLI class period. It's not 100% of their day. Emphasis on maximizing the amount of time students are speaking and use of state adopted curriculum materials there's probably a long list and Sherry could go through each of those, but I just wanted to highlight some of the big best practices of secondary DLI. I wanted to talk duration because duration ends up being a topic and it falls into some of the challenges that we'll talk about. In junior high, they have one class period, which is their DLI class, if you will, which is language and grammar. And then a second class period of culture, history, media. And why the second class period? The second class period can be one that students take or don't take, depending on what their schedule is and how tight that is. The benefits of that second class is just more time in the language, additional duration. Paired with the themes of culture, history, and media are the context for the questions on the AP test. So the AP test questions are asking within the context of that culture, that history, that media. So it's a booster, if you will, for the AP test. There are online options for both of those classes offered through Utah Online. I wanted to highlight that as well. Once again, if you're running up against a tight schedule and having to make some hard decisions once you hit secondary. In the high school, they drop to one class period, and I bulleted what those look like depending. So in 9th grade, DLI 5 with an AP exam option. Oftentimes, all the students take that AP exam in 9th grade. If they do not pass that class, they'll repeat in AP and have that opportunity to take the AP again as a 10th grader. If they do pass, they're moving on to concurrent courses or bridge courses, those are called, and could take a bridge course in 10th, 11th, and 12th. My understanding, and I'll see if Sherry will keep me honest here, is how that looks is they take the course for an entire year, but receive a semester's worth of credit in college. So it's a extended coverage of the concepts that they would get in a semester at college. Once again, there's online options for students in those areas as well. Talking benefits.
Sorry, Rick.
Oh, go ahead, Julie.
Are those classes, those are then, you said, on location at the university or at SLIC?
No, they are offered at the school.
They're offered
at the school level. They're a year-long course. Yep. Sherry's saying it's a university partner teacher.
Yeah, there's a university and the classroom teacher, so there's a university partner teacher.
I would imagine that those classes in 11th and 12th grade could get pretty small. What can you tell me about that?
They do.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then does that affect the FTE, or, because we don't receive extra funding for that, right?
Correct.
Or do we combine like 11th and 12th or something?
The university puts a cap on having no more than 30 in the class, and it just depends on the school. Olympus and Taylorsville are having 6 sections of bridge, because the reason the classes don't get small per se is it's a rotation through the 3 bridge courses. So 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students are combined in the class. It's not by grade specific. So you have the entire cohort of students, 10th through 12th grade, that can enroll in that class.
Okay.
So does that make sense? Those 6 sections are across those 3 grades.
But they're not the same, like, from year to year, because if they take it 10,
No,
11, and 12, they're going to have to
there are
have
3,000 level
differentiation.
classes. So I think it's 3115, 3116, and 3117, if I
Oh, wow,
remember right.
okay.
They're 3,000 level. That's why they have to have a university co-teacher, not just the
Gotcha.
teacher as a concurrent enrollment instructor.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. And I think where you were getting at, Julie, too, is a theme of attrition.
Yeah.
And we tried to get you some numbers on that.
Thanks.
Benefits of DLI, obviously second language skills, getting highly proficient in that language, cognitive skills of learning a second language, cultural competency, awareness, appreciation. If you're moving on and hitting that AP and that concurrent level, that college credit that's available, and then syllabi literacy becomes that much easier for you to gain as well. I want to say, and again, I'll look to Sherry to keep me honest, I want to say if you pass the AP test in 9th, you take concurrent 10, 11, 12, I think you have 2 semester classes left is all for a minor at the university.
That's correct.
All right.
Good job,
Challenges,
Rick.
let's get into the challenges. The scheduling, and in junior high, that culture, history, media course, and it fitting into student schedules and the desire for students to take that, depending on enrollment size, depending on student interest and other electives, that can influence how many sections of that course carry. And always in that master schedule, if you have singletons or not a lot of sections, or you have a tough number of kids, 20 kids want to take the course, you have to make some difficult decisions around carrying that course or not. Staffing becomes a challenge as well. So at the junior high level, if you're teaching the language class for 6, 7, 8, that's 3 preps there, and then the culture class as well. You can end up with quite a few preparations as a DLI teacher in junior high school. AP exam is a challenge, and I've given you some numbers here around pass rates for AP exam. I do want to highlight you're unable to take the 3,000 level concurrent classes unless you pass the AP exam. So here's pass rate from 2023 in the state, and then I've given you Granite's as well. So Spanish statewide 74% pass rate, Granite 77. French statewide 69, Granite 62, Chinese 44, Granite 39. So Chinese ends up being the hardest DLI AP test to pass in the state, and proves true in Granite. I wanted to highlight this, and I hopefully I do a good job of explaining it. The rigor metric, the rigor level that College Board looks at is they expect about 30%. They design the AP test to make sure 30% don't pass. So their rigor gauge is a 70% pass, or 30% are not going to pass, if that's making sense. So in test design, I put that in there just so you have a sense of the level of rigor they're trying for in that test, or those tests.
Can I ask a question? Have we looked into the possibility, instead of doing this as an AP, with them being at that level, and if they obviously can do concurrent enrollment, the bridge classes, have we looked at just flipping it completely over to concurrent enrollment? Because if this is the lowest pass rate, like Chinese is hard, and we had this discussion before, but
Yeah.
why do we not just in ninth grade flip it to concurrent?
Why the requirement for AP pass before concurrent?
Yeah.
Sherry might know,
Well,
but I don't.
It's the Board of Regents. So our partner in the bridge courses is the University of Utah. And so they're saying for a student to be prepared to engage in 3,000 level courses, they need to have passed the AP. And there would be a proficiency level associated with that. The proficiency expectations for Chinese are lower than Spanish or French. We would expect a student that passes the AP to be what would be considered an advanced low in an ACTFL proficiency, but Chinese you'd expect intermediate high. But the state is looking at possibilities for changing the pathway in Chinese, just because it is a difficult language. And that's borne out throughout the state, not just in Granite, that it's a tough language for students to learn.
I mean, I think that's true with any AP, that it's so frustrating to have these kids do so much work and to have it all be based on one single test. And it's kind of a hard, I know this is very personal right now, but.
I don't think it's come up yet, but they do get 2 chances. So if you don't pass as a freshman, you do get a second chance to pass the AP test as a sophomore. Granted, that restricts or limits your time with the bridge courses and the number of those courses that you can complete. But there is a second chance, just by way of information.
Yeah, and by way of information, I've lived that as a parent with Chinese. My oldest passed the first time. My second had to take it again as a 10th grader to pass.
Well, and I just, speaking in regards to AP, I think is a challenge to expect ninth graders to always, that's a big lift for a ninth grader to take an AP course in Chinese and pass it. So we've tried to set the expectation that the AP test, if you want to try it in ninth grade, great. But, and it's a good idea to try it, but 10th grade would be the year that you would be expected to pass. Also, I should probably mention that our Spanish AP pass rate is DLI and non-DLI. They're not separated out in the score reports we get from College Board.
So meaning native speakers.
It's also very difficult to ask a ninth grader to pass these tests in ninth grade when they have never taken another AP, and
Haven't experienced
ninth grade
it.
is a really tricky time for an AP exam. They do much better as they grow older, I think.
I think all of that's true. I do question whether or not that is or has historically been communicated to the freshman class. in terms of that expectation level, because there's a lot of
Angst.
consternation and angst, both from students and their parents over this pass rate.
There's a social element too, because
For sure.
those kids have been together and they know each other so well, and they've been together for that long, and who passed and who didn't, and who's going to need to take it again. There's a social element as well.
Yeah, so I question a little bit the messaging, whether that's reaching. I appreciate what's being messaged tonight. I question whether or not that has effectively reached parents over the years previous.
But I would also argue that there's a question as to whether the AP exam has reached parents at all, because I was in a meeting at a junior high, and the PTA president, we were talking about DLI. This person's son is in DLI and is a freshman, and we were talking about the AP. This is the PTA president of one of our elementaries, and he said, "Oh, I didn't know, so my kid's taking an AP test this year on this?" And didn't know. And if that's a PTA president who didn't know, that says that we have a messaging problem in general anyway, you know.
Awareness.
Well, I think it goes both ways. I don't want to have the sole focus be for students on the test. Really, the benefit of dual immersion, yes, if you pass the test, there's this add-on benefit of being able to take concurrent enrollment. But I would argue that there's value from being in dual immersion and learning the language, even if you don't ever pass the AP test. You've acquired language that opens up a whole myriad of benefits for you. And so I think that's a dual-edged sword to say, well, you know, we're going to put all the sole focus on whether, you know, the AP test and passing it, because there's value in just taking a rigorous course, whether you pass the test or not.
I don't want to get Julie going, but in my mind, I'm starting to wonder some of these things that we don't have for you tonight. Like, what's the pass rate on the second try? Or what percentage of DLI students enroll in a USHE school their very first year? So those are areas that we could dig into to really explore this.
Not only that, but while we say to our students, yes, there's value no matter what, our goal should be to have them proficient to pass the test, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's where we should be aiming for, I think.
Continuing with some challenges specifically to that attrition question, not only through elementary, but moving on. So let me walk you through this slide a little bit here. What we did is we took a look at the 2015 cohort who started first grade and were still enrolled in DLI in ninth grade. So in our West Side Spanish classes, about 67% started DLI in first, in ninth grade we're in. Chinese at Cottonwood, 33%, French at Kearns, 34%, Spanish Olympus, 56%, and French Skyline, 59%. I want to highlight here what we haven't done in this is scrubbed for just regular attrition, meaning whether DLI or not, what percentages of kids who start in a Granite school in first grade or in a Granite school in ninth. We know we have a lot of mobility, especially on our west side. Our mobility rates are higher, so those numbers, I want to couch those numbers with that idea. It doesn't mean necessarily. You got to take into consideration the moves and different things that can happen as well.
Yeah, I think just as a follow-up, if at some point you could inform us on that, like what is the attrition rate overall, if you were to look at that
Throw it up
for
against.
for the district cohort,
Yeah.
against that. And I would also like to see Taylorsville Chinese in this as well.
I left that off.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Thank you, Claire.
Yep, throwing it up against just what's our regular attrition versus just DLI, I think would be informative.
And also, thank you so much for getting these numbers. I really wanted to see this. And I'm a little bit assuming that these numbers are not going to be much different when you look at it when a kid moves into junior high. Like once they continue in junior high, it's probably likely that they're going to get to the ninth grade. Would that Do you think that's true, or do we need to just look at those numbers too?
We had some of those. Sherry has them. Let us talk you through those.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah.
percentage of students, or maybe I'll just have her present on it. So we do
Okay.
have the number going to the elementary. I know it's a secondary presentation, but we do have a
So,
attrition number.
as Rick mentioned, I just had to pull these numbers because I got your email last night and tried to pull this together today. I could easily determine the 2023 fifth grade, sixth grade, last year of elementary, and the 2024. So 2023, 29.7% of the students drop by the end of elementary. So that, we've got about 70% continuing. The range was from 20 to 33%, depending on the school. In 2024, 30% of the students have dropped by grade 5, with a range from 8 to 56%. So a
Depending on
larger
the
range
school.
there. Yeah, it
Your
just
range
depends
is
on the
by
school. So then, with the 2023 cohort, this year's first year of junior high, 10% of those students who were still in dual immersion when they exited elementary school, 10% dropped when they entered junior high. So West Side Spanish, and I'll just clarify why I've grouped West Side Spanish. We don't have a pure feeder pattern in our West Spanish dual immersion schools. For instance, Granger feeds to Valley, but Valley has no dual immersion. So students in dual immersion at Granger have to choose which of the schools they will special permit to. Valley Crest is a split feeder. So I just grouped those all together. So 96% of the students that were still in dual immersion last year in sixth grade in the Granger network, or fifth grade in Taylorsville or Kearns network, continued in dual immersion. Bonneville, 90% of the students continued. Benyon, 96% of the students continued. And Jefferson, 64%. Churchill had over 100%, but what that indicates, so they had more students enrolled in DLI 2 than they had exiting Morningside. But what that indicates is some of that is the Jefferson students have elected to open enroll at Churchill. We've also probably picked up from Canyon School District because Butler, the French dual immersion in Canyons is close proximity to Churchill. So Churchill has picked up approximately 15 students over what exited Morningside last year.
And again, I want to highlight some of those numbers. So first through fifth, you have about a 30% attrition. However, just like we talked about with the high school, what we're not giving you, or we would need to look at, is what's our attrition period when it comes to first through fifth grade in a school. And then a 10% drop of students in that transition from fifth up to the next level. But once again, what's our tradition, what's our attrition and despite DLI? When we talk challenges, we have a little bit of a balance challenge too, especially as we have that conversation around elementary schools and small schools and what happens once you're down to only one traditional class. The fact that we only have one Chinese on the east and west, it's a nice balance in terms of coverage. Same with French. Spanish, 1 east, 7 west. Why the imbalance, Rick? We have quite a cluster of schools that we have taken DLI, and quite honestly around native speaker needs and benefits that we can offer.
And I would just add, and none in the far west, if I can.
None in
for
the
Magna.
Cypress
Magna,
network.
yeah.
Yes, correct.
Board President, that's what we have for you this evening. Happy for any more questions.
Any other questions? Did you get all your questions answered, Julie?
I'd love to see that extra data that you said you would
Just
talk about.
the regular attritions, or transients.
My the schools, the junior, I have not heard any concern about this on the high school level at all, but in the junior highs, my junior highs seem to be concerned about this on an FTE level, especially as there's declining enrollment, and I would assume that as we continue to kind of, reevaluate where DLI schools are, a lot of our boundary studies have DLI schools in them. And so there seems to be this concern about that since I'm really only speaking to the 3 schools that are in my area because they all have low enrollment. And so they're particularly concerned with the way that DLI impacts their FTE. And I don't see this as an issue that's going to go away. I don't see that there's much of a way for us to, pack those junior highs with students, even from a boundary study perspective. I think we're going to have to just get smart and strategize of how to be successful with a small population on the junior high level. But it seems like that is the area where people are the most concerned. And it might, the most concern I'm hearing is coming from Evergreen, where they went from 2 Spanish DLI elementaries to 1. And they are really concerned about FTE and their population decline on DLI FTE at this point. But can you say anything to that? And are there strategies that we can put in place to help that pain point, or do we just have to say, yes, this is one of the sacrifices that we make, and we make it at the elementary, or making it at the junior high?
I think that's just it, to be honest with you. When you start getting small enough where it's singleton classes, or it's only one class offered one period, for parents' experience, it's fine. They don't have any pain points from that, unless perhaps they're paired, unless there's a conflict and they have to make a choice, or they're paired with another student who they'd rather not have them with, or those types of things. The staffing, the FTE, and the master scheduling resulting in many preparations for the teacher, meaning they just have a lot of different standards, a lot of different courses they're having to prepare for. Those all just start coming into play as you get smaller. And you're having to perhaps carry a class that's, the hardest ones are those low 20s, high teen classes in secondary that you're having to make a decision on carrying or not. So similar to upper grades in elementary, that challenge around just smaller singleton, smaller class size, and only offered at one time.
Historically, though, Penn has a really strong dual immersion program. They're the one where you see the 8% attrition. And when we started dual immersion, we only had Penn going to Evergreen. We didn't have Mill Creek initially. So at that point, Evergreen had one DLI teacher that taught DLI 3, 4, and 5 before we reconfigured. And then when Mill Creek traditionally had a rather large attrition rate, so there weren't that many students from Mill Creek continuing on in dual immersion. Penn traditionally has the 60. We were probably having about 20 students go from Mill Creek, so it was making a cohort of about 70 to 80 students that we would be entering every year. So that would be 2 sections. So Evergreen did have to add a second Spanish teacher. What I would probably foresee happening is in the future they may drop down to just one DLI teacher and maybe one traditional Spanish teacher.
Which is what is in all of our other junior highs?
Typically, yes.
DLI. Okay. And then the other question is, I can't remember what level of discussion we've had about this here, but another pain point that I'm hearing from all of my DLI schools is this sense of that I discussed earlier, where people in first grade don't really know what they're getting themselves into. They're just like, yeah, I want my kid to learn this language. But this communication piece, almost like a paper they sign that says that they read this and they know what they're getting into, that not only says, then in junior high, your kid will take 2 class periods, and in high school, your kid will take this, but also says, and in junior high, the complication with that is that you may not be able to take band. You might have to sacrifice it for something, or, just
Or-
kind of,
Or the
sorry.
state,
Oh my gosh, I'm so
Or-
sorry I said that.
Or drama. Sorry. No,
But
because
I
I've had this
think-
conversation with our principal at the junior high, and I said, or we have, let them know we have offerings in the summer, and I've pushed for this with the summer school with Stephanie. She and I have had long conversations, but they have the ability to take digital literacy and health and PE online. So they have those to free up in order to do some
Oh,
of this.
see,
So-
I love giving that information.
And we do articulate that to parents, and they do sign a parent commitment form when they accept their placement. I just think that, being a parent of 5 myself, what you hear in kindergarten and what you remember when they enter junior high kind of evaporates.
Sherry, that is real. That is real. So maybe we need to reevaluate, like, maybe we need a yearly something, or, I feel like parents are kind of caught off guard by, and they get to the junior high level and go, wait, what?
yeah.
And I feel like they're like upset or something. And I'm like, but you signed up for this, this was voluntary. So.
This far along, though, I think that we've learned these things. Early on, we didn't necessarily know what the DLI AP French pass rate was going to be. There's some things that we've learned. We've learned what some of the challenges are on elective choices later, and we could put all of that together in a nice format that's just available to parents as they're thinking about it, or just reminded around what the benefits are, and then being really transparent and honest around the challenges. Offering specialized courses doesn't come at a cost. To be able to do those things, whether it's whatever kind of course it is, to be able to offer a specialized course, you're always running up against this. It'll probably be a singleton. Will it carry? How many kids? Where in the master schedule will it fit, and what will it be up against? So I think offering specialized courses to students is the right thing and good thing to do, but there are some challenges that come with it.
And we reiterate at the elementary when we do the presentations, there's value in doing dual immersion just in elementary. If that's all that your child chooses to do because they get to junior high and they're no longer interested in the language you chose for them in kindergarten, and they only have the elementary experience, there's still value in that. We know cognitively, their cognitive ability is improved. All of those benefits of dual immersion come from just an elementary experience. So ideally, we'd like to see them go through to the bridge courses, but if they only do elementary, they benefited from that, in my opinion.
And I agree with that, but I see that's where our problem is because when they get to the junior high and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I don't want to take the culture class because I don't have room and I don't get to take all the fun stuff. That's where it struggles, because we have the ones that are, oh, hey, we want our kid to continue this. Well, we only have, 5 kids signed up for the culture class, and then they have to drop it. I know Bonneville does this a little differently. I don't know. I'm not saying I approve or disapprove of what they do, but they do it differently than Benyon, but I don't know what the other junior highs do. But it just seems like that's where we're coming up against this. To I think Julie's point, this affects our FTE. We've got we had 42 kids in the Chinese DLI 7th grade or 6th grade this year. That's
Well, it is one of
So-
the drawbacks to the 7-period day when we, were more early on in dual immersion, more of the junior highs were on the block schedule, so there was a little bit more space in the
Yeah.
student schedule. So, yeah, I understand.
And I know that you would agree with me, because I was thinking the same thing while she was saying that. And what I celebrate about what you're saying is you're putting the student first. But on the other hand, when you put FTE first, you're also putting the student first. So it's a very tricky balance, I think, of how to handle that. I think my last question was on the junior high level, and Clark and Nicole, I'd love to hear what you have to say since you've had kids in the program or anybody else, but does you know how there's kind of this social group, and you alluded to it on the high school level in the AP. Does this group continue through the junior high and they are less likely to kind of make other friends because they're in this group, or what have you seen on that?
I wouldn't characterize it that they're less likely because we're talking about 2 periods out of 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a lot of cross-pollination throughout the rest of the day. I know that's a big word for me.
Like
huh?
it. Okay.
So I don't perceive that to be the case. In fact, a common discussion in our house is, oh, I don't remember that friend's name. They must not be somebody from the Chinese program. No, Dad, they've been around for a long time.
Oh, huh.
So, you know, I think I even have that perceived bias that all of your friends are from the Chinese program, and I get corrected on that still routinely, if not daily.
Okay, that's good.
They're sick of each other by that point. So
Yeah.
they're not, no.
I'll say anecdotally, again, I look to Sherry to keep me honest, is one thing that does happen in junior high, we know junior high behavior is a little bit harder than elementary behavior. And sometimes if you got a class who've been together for 5 years, they have their own mode of operation in a lot of ways and know each other well. And so sometimes the behavior with that group you can run up against that, paired with culturally, if you didn't grow up in the U.S., the cultural gap in managing 13-year-olds can be a little bit of a challenge too.
Especially in the Chinese, it's
Yeah.
very different.
Yeah.
I will say from my kids, they do, it's really interesting because I don't want to say they're on this track, but it's kind of, the kids that are in the Chinese class are in that Chinese class, which only allows certain other classes for them to take certain times a day.
So
They
then they're
are
all in
often
kinda-
in, the English, the ELA class with kids that are also in Chinese or in that. But they also have, because there are opportunities, they have orchestra with somebody else or SBO with somebody else or.
And they have other kids in that English class.
Yeah, they do have more
Cross-pollination.
math. Or what?
Cross-pollination.
Cross-pollination. So they do have opportunities for cross-pollination. That sounds wrong. But it does, they do know each other really well from that part. But my oldest has a lot of friends from outside of the Chinese program. So
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much. Thanks, Sherry,
Thank
for
you.
being here. Thanks,
Thank
Rick.
you, Sherry.
You're welcome.
All right.
She got a lot of that data today, so
That's
that
what
was
she told
super
me. She's
great
like,
of her.
Julie sent me this long email. This was an arduous process.
It was
That's exactly
demanding.
the word she used.
It was demanding.
Just kidding. All right, we have need of an executive session for the potential sale and/or purchase of land and negotiations. And I will entertain a motion as such.
I move that we go into executive session for the purchase of land
For the purpose of
for the purpose of
potential sale or.
potential sale of land
And negotiation.
and negotiations. I'm,
Second.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second to move into executive session for the potential sale and/or purchase of land and for negotiations. This is a roll call vote. Please state your name and say aye or nay.
Julie Jackson, yes.
Kim Chandler, yes.
Connie Burgess, yes.
Chris Wynn, yes. Karen Winder, yes.
Clark Nelson, aye.
Nicole McDermott, yes. All right. We will adjourn up to the